Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're exploring something, well, you interact with it multiple times a day, probably, without even thinking about it.
Yeah?
Food safety and the FDA's role in making sure that what you eat doesn't send you running for the bathroom.
Right.
We've got some insights pulled directly from the FDA's website, updated as recently as October 1st, 2024.
Wow.
So pretty recent stuff, and you might be surprised to learn just how much goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's really interesting
Keep your food safe.
how the FDA has shifted from simply reacting to outbreaks to actively trying to prevent them in the first place. It's a much more proactive approach.
That's a really interesting point. So it's not just about like swooping in after the fact. They're actually working to stop these issues before they even happen.
Exactly.
Wow.
One of the key ways they do this is through the Office of Microbiological Food Safety.
Okay.
This team analyzes data from past outbreaks and other sources to identify potential hazards and develop targeted strategies to prevent them.
So they're using data to kind of predict where problems might crop up.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive. But the food system is so vast, how can they possibly stay on top of everything?
Well, that's where partnerships come in.
Oh.
The FDA works with a whole range of partners, from local farmers to international organizations.
Oh, wow.
For example, they've got the Partnership for Food Protection,
Okay.
which coordinates food safety efforts across different levels of government, and domestic mutual reliance initiatives, which streamline collaboration with state and local agencies.
So it's a real team effort.
Right.
Which makes sense. You can't manage something this complex in isolation.
Yeah.
It's like a giant puzzle, and everyone has a piece to contribute.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of putting the pieces together, the FDA is really embracing the power of cutting-edge technology to improve food safety. One example is whole genome sequencing, or WGS.
Okay, I've heard of that before, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details. Could you break it down for us?
Of course, essentially, WGS allows scientists to analyze the entire DNA sequence of a foodborne pathogen.
Okay.
This is incredibly powerful because it allows them to track how pathogens are evolving, identify the source of outbreaks with incredible precision, and even predict potential outbreaks before they happen.
Wow. So it's like having a fingerprint for each pathogen, which makes tracing them back to their source so much easier.
Precisely. And this technology has already had a real impact.
Really?
For example, in 2023,
Okay.
WGS was instrumental in tracing the source of a major E. coli outbreak
Oh, wow.
to contaminated romaine lettuce.
Oh, no.
This quick identification prevented further spread and potentially saved countless lives.
That's incredible. So WGS is like a food safety detective helping to solve these mysteries and keep us all safe.
That's a great way to put it, and the FDA isn't stopping there.
What else?
They're also exploring the use of predictive analytics to forecast potential food safety issues.
Predictive analytics, I've heard that term thrown around a lot lately.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean in the context of food safety?
It's all about using data to identify patterns and trends that can help predict future events.
Okay.
In this case, the FDA is using sophisticated algorithms that analyze data from a variety of sources, including weather patterns, crop yields, and historical outbreak data to forecast potential food safety risks.
So they're basically trying to create a food safety weather forecast.
Right.
That's pretty futuristic, but even with all these advanced tools and proactive strategies, I imagine outbreaks still happen sometimes, right?
You're absolutely right. No system is perfect. But when outbreaks do occur, the FDA have a specialized team ready to respond, the Coordinated Outbreak Response and Evaluation Network,
Okay.
or CORE for short.
Core network, it sounds like something out of a spy movie.
Right.
What exactly does this rapid response team do?
Well, they act like food safety detectives when an outbreak occurs. CORE brings together experts from different fields like epidemiologists, lab technicians, food safety specialists to investigate the outbreak, track down the source of the contamination, and recommend steps to contain it. They're on the case to protect public health.
It's reassuring to know that even when things go wrong, the FDA has this dedicated team working to get to the bottom of it. So CORE is reactive, but we talked earlier about the FDA's proactive strategies. Can you give me an example of how that plays out in the real world?
Sure, their partnerships with domestic farmers are a great example.
Okay.
They provide guidance and support, helping farmers implement best practices for food safety on their farms. They're not just about setting regulations, they're working directly with farmers to ensure food is produced safely from the very beginning.
So it's a collaborative approach working together to build a culture of food safely from the ground up that makes sense.
Well,
You can have all the rules and regulations in the world, but if people don't understand them or know how to implement them, it's not going to be very effective.
it's exactly. Education and collaboration are key. And this is where those cutting-edge scientific advancements we discussed earlier come into play. Remember whole genome sequencing?
Oh yeah, the DNA detective work.
Well, it's being used not only to trace back outbreaks, but also to understand how these pathogens evolve and spread. This knowledge is essential for developing effective prevention
Oh,
strategies.
so it's giving them a much deeper understanding of these pathogens and how to outsmart them. It's like a game of chess, but with food safety at stake.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the FDA's website mentions they're even doing environmental studies related to food safety. It
Mhm.
makes you wonder, what could those entail?
That caught my eye too. It sounds like they're looking beyond the food itself and considering the entire ecosystem surrounding food production.
Right. These studies focus on understanding how environmental factors like water and soil conditions can contribute to contamination. Imagine they might investigate how irrigation methods or even climate change could impact the safety of our produce.
That's a fascinating level of detail. It really shows how the FDA is taking a comprehensive approach to food safety. But with all this emphasis on prevention, what happens when those preventative measures fail? What does the FDA do when there's an actual outbreak?
They rely on that incredible core network we discussed. They have a sophisticated system for monitoring potential outbreaks using data from a variety of sources, including reports from healthcare providers and labs across the country. It's like a nationwide food safety radar.
So they're constantly on the lookout trying to catch any signs of trouble before it spreads too far. That makes sense. Early detection is crucial in these situations.
Absolutely. And when the radar picks up something, CORE jumps into action, using their detective skills to track down the source of the outbreak and contain it. These investigations can be incredibly complex, involving interviews, lab testing, and extensive data analysis, but it's all crucial for protecting public health.
It's amazing to see how much work goes into keeping our food safe. We often take it for granted, but there's a whole army of people working tirelessly behind the scenes to protect us.
It's a true testament to the FDA's commitment to public health, but they can't do it alone. The legal framework plays a huge role in ensuring food safety. We touched on the Food Safety Modernization Act earlier, but I think it's worth exploring that in a bit more detail.
Absolutely. FSMA is a pretty big deal, right? It was the first major overhaul of food safety laws in over 70 years. I'm curious to know how it's actually changed things on the ground.
Well, one of the key shifts FSMA introduced was a move away from simply reacting to outbreaks to actively preventing them. It gave the FDA more authority to regulate the entire food supply chain from farm to table.
So it's not just about catching problems after they happen. It's about setting standards and practices to prevent those problems from arising in the first place.
Precisely. It's like establishing a food safety constitution, laying down the ground rules for everyone involved in the food system.
So it's a level playing field. Everyone has to play by the same rules, which helps ensure a safer food supply for all of us. It sounds like a really comprehensive approach. But I have one more question. What about us, the consumer? What role do we play in all of this? It's easy to feel like food safety is out of our hands.
Right.
Like it's all up to the FDA and the food producers, but we're not off the hook, are we?
You're absolutely right. Consumers play a crucial role in keeping themselves and their families safe.
Okay.
It starts with those basic food safety principles we all learned growing up.
Yeah.
Wash your hands thoroughly before handling food, cook food to the proper temperatures, and store it correctly.
Those are the golden rules, right? My mom drilled those into me from a young age.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's easy to get complacent. We think, oh, I've been doing this for years. I know what I'm doing. But it's always good to have a refresher, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it goes beyond those basic practices.
Okay.
We can also be proactive by staying informed about food recalls and advisories. The FDA's website is a great resource for this.
Oh.
They have up-to-date information on any potential food safety issues.
So it's like having a direct line to the Food Safety Command Center.
Right?
We can check in and make sure we're not about to eat something that's been recalled. It's pretty handy.
Exactly.
But speaking of things we should pay attention to, what about those best by or use by dates on food packages? Are those hard and fast rules or can we fudge them a bit?
That's a great question. And there's often a lot of confusion around those dates.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that those dates are primarily about food quality, not safety.
Oh, okay.
A product might still be perfectly safe to eat after the best by date,
Okay.
but its flavor or texture might not be as good.
So it's more about peak deliciousness than a danger zone.
Right.
That makes sense. I've definitely thrown things out based on those dates, even if they seemed fine.
It's always best to err on the side of caution, of course. If something looks, smells, or tastes off, trust your senses and toss it out regardless of the date.
Our senses are our first line of defense, aren't they? We can usually tell when something's not quite right, but, this whole conversation has really highlighted how much goes into keeping our food safe. It's a complex system, but it seems like the FDA is doing a fantastic job.
They really are. They're using science, technology, collaboration, and a whole lot of hard work to ensure that what we eat is safe and healthy.
And let's not forget the important role we play as consumers. By following those basic food safety tips and staying informed, we can all contribute to a safer food system. So next time you're enjoying a meal, take a moment to appreciate everyone who helped get that food to your plate safely, from the farmers to the food producers to the FDA scientists working behind the scenes.
Well said. And remember, if you're ever curious about the journey your food has taken or have questions about food safety, the FDA's website is an amazing resource. So stay curious, stay informed, and enjoy your next meal with confidence.
That's great advice. And there you have it, folks, a deep dive into the world of food safety. It's a fascinating topic, and we hope you learned something good today. Until next time, stay safe and bon appetit.